The United States ranks first in the world for providing the best environment for entrepreneurship to thrive, yet startup activity is still well below the pre-Great Recession average. What are the biggest barriers to successful entrepreneurship, and what can leaders in both the public and private sectors do to increase opportunities for startups and entrepreneurs? We'll tackle those questions and more this morning with top government officials, venture capitalists, entrepreneurs, and industry leaders. Before we begin, a few housekeeping notes. In addition to our audience here at the museum, we're live streaming on thehill.com/events. Please keep your phones on silent. However, we do encourage you to engage in the discussion on social media. You can follow us on Twitter at The Hill Events or using the hashtag #SmallBizBigIdeas. We're going to be taking questions from the audience this morning, so please be on the lookout for members of our team with handheld mics. Finally, there is a short feedback survey on each of your chairs. We'd love to hear from you about our events, so please take a moment to fill them out at the end of today's program. So let's dive right in. We begin this morning with the SBA Administrator, Linda McMahon. As an entrepreneur and business executive herself, Administrator McMahon now leads a team of professionals dedicated to ensuring entrepreneurs have the tools and support they need to start, grow, and succeed in business. Administrator McMahon has been a longtime advocate for women in leadership and business and has been widely recognized as one of the country's top female entrepreneurs and executives. Joining the administrator on stage is my colleague, the Hill's editor-in-chief, Bob Cusack. Bob, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Diana. Administrator, thanks for joining us this morning. You were confirmed in February of last year, got over 80 votes, which is highly unusual.
On Valentine's Day, by the way. There's a lot of love
nice,
there.
Right? Quite memorable. I want to ask you just kind of a general question to open up is, what has surprised you about the job, and what is, if you can give us kind of your daily routine in the job? So I'm sure, you're talking backstage about traveling a lot, but I'm sure it varies.
Well, I haven't been, well, first of all, thank you for having me this morning. It's great to be here before this audience. I always like to talk about small businesses and their contribution, to our economy, being the backbone of the economy. And when I was hired to do this job, I don't think I had a lot of surprises relative to the job itself, because having come from a background of building a business from the ground up, which is what then President-elect Trump said he wanted someone in that job when he asked me to come down to Trump Tower and talk to him about it. He said, I want somebody who's actually built a business. I want somebody in the business community who knows ups and downs and what it's like, so that when you're talking to small businesses, they know you've got a little gravitas about what you're talking about. Mm-hmm. So I really wasn't surprised about the nature of the job in terms of bringing small businesses together, how can we help them, supporting the president's initiatives, and so that was not a surprise. Mm-hmm. But I do travel a fair amount in the job. I would say it's about 50-50. I'm in the office probably at least half, maybe 55, 60% of the time, and then on the road about 40% of the time, because I think it's incredibly important to get out and to visit with our small businesses around the country. So I target those visits to visit one of our 68 district offices for SBA, those people who are on the ground actually working with our customers and our consumers. But at the same time, I meet with small business owners. I tour their businesses. I hear what their issues are. I think that's incredibly important to bring back that information to Washington.
What are you hearing from them? What are they talking about? What are the big issues that are confronting small businesses right now?
Well, it's a very optimistic view right now in the country from small businesses. They have been buoyed first by talk of tax cuts and regulatory rollback, and now that that's in actuality happened, that optimism and that enthusiasm, is continuing. Mm-hmm. They are, from an SBA perspective, first quarter last year over first quarter this year, we saw about almost a 20% increase in our loan demands for which SBA guarantees the loans from our lenders, which is very indicative of startup or expansion. And I think it was just yesterday or day before, NFIB had even new statistics out that showed not only was that optimism level holding and increasing, but we were seeing, more startups. We were seeing more money invested in capital, in wages, and so businesses, in effect, booming for small businesses now in our country.
So you're hearing a lot of feedback on the new tax law.
Yes.
And what in particular part of the law had really helped them? And also, I know regulations is a big issue that that we hear a lot from businesses from across the spectrum. What are the big things that they're looking forward to going forward? Just the implementation of the tax law and the breaks that they get?
Absolutely. Let me just give you a couple of examples. Last week was National Small Business Week, and so I toured started in Washington, then I went to, and came up the East Coast on a bus, which was quite fun. I wasn't on the bus all the time, because actually they had more fun when I was not on the bus. And I told them what happened on the bus, stayed on the bus, and I think that's exactly what happened. But so in touring businesses there, I was at a small B company in Savannah, Georgia. And so I asked the owner, I said, so tell me a little bit about tax cuts. What have you seen so far? And he said, look, I haven't filed my taxes, obviously, for this year when they're going to be effective. And he said, but I'm a small business. He said, you can look around here. Here's my business. Every single dollar that I'm not paying in taxes or for regulatory compliance is going into my business. I'm either hiring someone, I'm improving a piece of equipment, and he showed me a piece of equipment that he'd been able to put more money into. And then there was a baker up in Braintree, Mass. About 5 or 6 weeks ago, and it was a bread baking company. And so I was in there and touring, and boy, the smells in that company, oh, all you wanted to do was have a pound of butter and have them pull out that bread and just give you some. But the owner there, as we're looking at 3 or 4 ovens baking different kinds of bread, he said, you see this oven over here? That's $1.5 million. He said, under the new tax cuts and write-off, he said, I'm going to buy a new oven. I'm going to expand my footprint. I'm going to actually increase my facility. I'm going to hire new people, and I'm going to be able to service accounts for which I've already had orders that I've had to turn down. So those are 2 examples of actual response on the road.
You mentioned that you're a successful business owner, but you've had your challenges. You filed for bankruptcy. And
Yes.
I grew up in Connecticut. I drove by the wrestling building in Stamford, and it was a mess. But what advice do you give to small businesses, because you've gone through the struggles, is when you're advising people on how to start, what do you say?
Well, relative to myself, and if they looked at bankruptcy, it really wasn't in the business that we knew so well, my husband and I. It wasn't relative to the wrestling business. It was that we invested in a business we knew nothing about. And it was that business, really, that prompted the bankruptcy. So my advice is always to really understand the business that you're going to get into. Plan it well. Protect your downside. And understand that one of the most critical things that you can have when you start up is not being undercapitalized, and understand how to manage your cash flow. Most businesses fail because of that. They're undercapitalized and they don't know how to manage their cash flow. You have to have a passion for what you do, because if you're an entrepreneur, for those of you in the audience, you already know this, it is 24/7. It is a commitment. And you are trying to manage your downside risk, but you always have that optimism that you're going to overcome it. And most of the time, you will. But it really takes that focused effort every single day to make sure that you're not taking your eye off the ball.
The economy in general is doing quite well. Unemployment, as the president noted, has dipped under 4%. Where do you see the economy going and affecting small businesses? Do you see a boom coming in entrepreneurship?
Well, clearly I'm not an economist, but what I really see is that from the feedback that we're getting, the tax cuts not only are helping businesses on the side of their being able to invest and hire people, et cetera, but consumers have more money in their pockets. I mean, and it's just the given law of how it works. When consumers have more money, they're going to buy more goods and services, which means we need to produce more goods and services. So that is a really positive impact on the environment and the economy, and I expect to see that trend continuing for a while.
What's your agenda for the rest of the year and going into next year
At SBA?
at SBA?
Well, continuing what we're doing now, excuse me, we are really trying to make sure that, from an operational perspective from SBA, excuse me, that our field offices are absolutely in line with the directive from headquarters. One of the things that I found and one of the things that our field offices asked when I first came on board was to make sure that they had clear direction from what my vision and my goal was, and my vision was to make sure that we had everything in place to support our businesses that were starting, that we provided them proper access to resources. Now, all businesses need access to capital, and it's one of the things you'll hear from a startup, that we need access to capital. That's true. So we have lending experts that are in our district offices. As I said, I might not have said this, there are 68 in our country, and I have visited now 44 of them. But I want to make sure that we have our lending experts in place, our business development people in place, because what businesses need as much as access to capital, we have found, is that networking opportunity, mentoring that can take place from our resource partners, our SCORE offices, our women's business centers, our veterans outreach centers, our small business development companies. We all work in tandem to put programs in place and they are at no charge to our consumers who want to go and take advantage of these offices. So I want to make sure that all of those things are in place to service our entrepreneurial community.
What programs does SBA have to help women and minorities start their own businesses?
Well, we have women's business centers. There are over 100 of them around the country, and they're located typically close to either our district office or the Small Business Development Center, which is oftentimes connected with the university. And there's a grant sharing program that we work with those. And we want to make sure that not just women, but they are primarily women that go to the women's business centers, because men would have a little bit of an objection to heading into that sometimes. But we want to make sure that there is the right focus on looking at the business itself. What is going to be the business plan? What is it that you are trying to accomplish? What business do you want to grow? Is it a good idea? Is it scalable? And if it is, what's going to be your marketing plan? How are we going to help you get access to capital? How are we helping you with your pitch? Because often, you go in to make a pitch to a banker or to a particular business partner, but you don't really know how to pitch your company. So we kind of strive to get that down from the 20-minute wandering to the 3 to 5 minute, very concise, this is my business, this is what I want to accomplish, this is how I expect it to grow, this is my experience in it and why I'm going to make it a success.
To make it succinct and kind of the elevator
Yes.
pitch. Okay. What about coordination among federal agencies? How does that work? Because many businesses, and we've seen with the stock market, they're pleased with this administration. It's business friendly, but there are a lot of agencies, whether it's Commerce or the Labor Department, they're dealing with industry. How do you coordinate policies across the Trump administration?
Well, I think I can speak for the cabinet members that I'm working with right now. Secretary Acosta at Labor, Secretary DeVos at the Education Department, Secretary Perdue from Agriculture, and I actually spent a day on the road in an RV with Secretary Perdue. Now that's an experience. That was great fun. We were touring some small businesses and farmers. We did a town hall up in Ohio because we know how important it is for our outreach into our rural community. As a matter of fact, it's one of the directives from the president that he really does want to see rural growth, and that's through broadband expansion, but it's to make sure that we can have outreach into those markets. From an SBA perspective on that scope, we want to make sure that we can have more online lending in areas where we don't really have bricks and mortar banks, and that we can have more webinars for the community that's there to, they can come onto SBA.gov. There's an incredible amount of information, but if they can't have access to the broadband programs, we want to make sure that they can do that. So my work with Secretary Acosta from Labor, also looking at association health plans to bring down the cost of health care so the small businesses can buy into that. Through Secretary DeVos, looking at how we can increase our apprenticeship and internship programs to help fill the labor shortage that we're seeing in the country. So I think there is a lot cross-communication.
What are the biggest challenges facing small businesses? We've heard a lot recently. There's been some activity on the Hill regarding cyber attacks. Is it labor shortages? Is it something else?
What I hear the most, and it used to be tax and regulation, what I'm hearing more now than anything else is labor shortage, finding a skilled workforce, and that's really true in manufacturing and in the construction industry. Those are two, and those are a lot of small businesses, especially in the construction industry. So they are looking for skilled labor. And so I think part of what we've been looking at in the country, which you've heard the president talk about, are the apprenticeship programs. How do we move the workforce into having the skills that business needs? So I think the private sector is working more closely now with our community colleges, with our vocational schools, sometimes even to help develop the curriculum so that when those students graduate, they move right into the business field. And I think that's incredibly important.
When we have people from the administration, I always like to ask them, what does the public maybe not fully understand about President Trump? You work with him closely. You have a cabinet meeting later today. What do you tell people about President Trump?
Well, most often I'm asked, what's he really like? Now, how many times do you ever hear that? They've asked me that about my husband all the time, who's a television celebrity. What's he really like behind the scenes? Well, I can tell you the President Trump, first, he was not president when I knew him 20 or 25 years ago. And we've been business friends, business acquaintance, not social so much. But he knows his stuff. He was always a loyal partner when we dealt with him on a business level. Always very in tune to what it is both sides needed to bring to the table to make what we were trying to do successful. And we were successful, in some appearances and interactions with our businesses. I found him charming and witty and a good listener. And I find him that way in the cabinet meetings as well. So I don't see any change from how I've known him for, over a couple of decades.
We're going to open it up for questions. You can ask the administrator any question, whether her bus rides or RV rides. But if you can, we have people with mics, so someone will come by. If you can just wait for the mic. And
Excuse me.
Somewhere there in the middle. Is anyone? And if you can just identify yourself. We've got a few minutes, so if you can get as many questions as we can for the administrator. There's one back there.
Oh, hi. My name is Bill Cunningham, minorityfinance.com. Madam Administrator, financing is always an issue for small businesses. There are some new tools that have been developed in other countries, and I'm speaking of initial coin offerings, ICOs, the cryptocurrencies. Has the SBA thought about using those tools to help finance small businesses in the U.S.?
We have not gotten into that at all. We're pretty much, traditional financing, if you will, through our lenders, through banks, because SBA, as you know, guarantees this money, and it's taxpayer money. We don't actually make the loans, so we are guaranteeing the loans that are made through more of our traditional lenders, our bankers, our credit unions, that sort of thing.
Hi, good morning, and thank you for coming with us this morning. My name is Luana Russell. I'm president of Business Management Associates and also the chair of the Small Business Majority, an advocacy group for small business owners. You mentioned healthcare and access to healthcare for small businesses, and obviously as an entrepreneur, I find the rising cost of healthcare very, very difficult on the business. We did have the Affordable Care Act, which has now been somewhat disbanded, and so you talk about the small business associations trying to build up some level of health care. I'd like to better understand what that position is, and I'd also like to better understand how that's going to be different and or better than what we had.
Secretary Acosta from Labor has posted a new rule about association health cares, and I'm actually going to go out on the road with him probably in June. We're going to go out talking to small businesses about the opportunities for association health care purchase. It gives you more power as a larger purchaser in the marketplace to bring down the cost of health care. I don't know all the particulars of it yet. It is a general rule that has been posted, but if you have a contiguous area of businesses that are together, they can form associations. There may be trade associations that represent like hotels, other small business, construction workers, and within those associations, they'll be able to go into the marketplace to buy competitively. And for the first time, typically a one-person business hasn't been considered a group. So now, if you are just one person, a sole proprietor, you will be considered a group. You'll be able to be in that marketplace buying at group rates. So kind of on a general basis, but stay tuned for more about that.
Good morning. My name is Max Trujillo from MJT Policy, a consulting firm. Administrator, your agency is the top agency during recovery efforts after natural disasters. I wanted to ask you in terms of how do you see the recovery efforts in Texas, Florida, Puerto Rico, USVI, in terms of the business community coming back from such a hard season of hurricanes last year, and what do you expect in terms of what lessons learned from those hurricanes in the upcoming hurricane season? Thank you.
Well, that's a really complex question. It's one of the things that I learned early on when I came on at SBA, in fact, just shortly before I was confirmed into this job, was that a whole different area of SBA was disaster economic recovery. And I didn't know that in years past. I hadn't even thought about that. So I learned an awful lot about what it is we need to do to be helpful for disaster economic recovery. SBA goes on the ground right behind FEMA, often co-located in FEMA offices, because our goal is to get businesses back on their feet, is to get homeowners back in their homes. And it is a time when SBA actually acts as the bank. We loan the money this time. So we are approving those loans and we are making those loans through our offices. So we want to get in on the ground very quickly and do damage verification. We very quickly want to make sure that those who are applying for these loans, these are not grants, unlike FEMA, ours are loans, so we have to make sure that those people that we are granting the loans to have the ability to repay because this is taxpayer money. So we have shortened the process in which we get that verification from IRS. We have more electronic applications now to make sure that we can, in a more timely fashion, process these loans. I think it was for the last 3 hurricanes, for Harvey, Irma, and Maria, we shortened the time to respond and approve those loans from 90 to 45 days, $1 billion, which was cut in half from Sandy 5 years ago. We have more people on the ground to service to make sure that we are processing these loans and getting people back in their businesses, because it's not on their businesses. The only time SBA also does mortgages, and even renters who have lost property can apply, for loans to get personal property back. So these loans can be used for inventory, to get back on your feet, because we know if we get people back into their businesses, as soon as businesses are, small businesses, they're the glue in the communities, the faster that they can get back in business, the faster those communities are going to come back online. And then get people back in their homes, because the two really go hand in hand. So it has been my job, and let me just give you a little side story. When I first assumed this job a year ago, I talked to the head of our disaster relief. I said, okay, what is the worst thing you've ever had to deal with? And he said, several years ago when Katrina came through and Rita and Wilma followed closely behind, that was really big. And then Sandy 5 years ago was also a huge storm to have to deal with. I said, okay, I want you to pretend that we are hit with 3 Katrinas all at one time. And he goes, well, that's really unlikely. I said, I don't care how unlikely it is. I want you to pretend we're going to get hit with 3 Katrinas. I want you to show me what the plan of action is for those 3. I have visited our Disaster Relief Center in Dallas twice. We have 800 or 900 people full-time in there that are doing nothing, because we think about big hurricane seasons, but I mean, there are floods, tornadoes, wildfires happening all the time. So we have people on the ground responding to those full-time year-round. But the big storm seasons come in and a lot of focus gets there. And so we did tabletop exercises. We really had a great plan. Of course, it's never as good, or you're never as prepared as you would be when the storm hits. But we had a surge in our employee hiring. We went from that 800 or 900 to 5,200 people over very short weeks, bringing them in for customer service, for loan verifications, for loan processing. I said, we have to think outside of the box. We turned our entire conference center and SBA headquarters into customer service and loan verification. Computer lines just dropped one after the other. So we really took a very proactive stance. And so that was kind of a paradigm shift for us and a new model as we're moving in more now into the hurricane season this year, where you're going to be able to amp up, off of that and even be better prepared. So the goal, get businesses back online, people back in their homes, get communities to be vibrant again so that we can have that economic recovery. And I went with the president to Houston. I went with him to Puerto Rico. I went on my own to Florida and visited with Governor Scott to make sure that we, had the pieces in place to get everybody back up as quickly as possible.
Some good questions. We've run out of time. Please thank the administrator for joining us this morning.
Thank you.
You so much. Really appreciate it. That was great.
Really
Very
good.
great.
Thank you so much.